The Denver sky was gray that morning, the kind of cold, heavy silence that wraps around a practice field before something changes forever. Cameras were focused on the big names, the veterans, the stars, the headline makers. But somewhere behind them, quietly strapping his pads, was Nik Bonitto. No spotlight, no hype, no noise. Just the sound of Velcro, breathing, and a heartbeat that refused to slow down. For most fans, Bonitto was just a name on the roster, a second-round pick from Oklahoma who hadn't quite found his rhythm. He wasn't the kind of player you'd find on ESPN's highlight reels or on fantasy football wish lists. In fact, by his second year, people had started whispering that dreaded label every young athlete fears. Bust. The word hung over him like fog. But what the world didn't see, what the cameras never caught, was what happened when everyone else went home, long after practice ended. While the field lights flickered against the Denver skyline, Nik Bonitto stayed, rewatching practice tape, running drills alone in the dark, repeating one move again and again, his spin step, his burst, his hand placement. He wasn't just training his body. He was rebuilding his identity. He had heard every criticism. Too light for the NFL, not physical enough, good college guy, but not pro material. He'd smile politely during interviews, say the right things, but inside, it burned. Every word, every doubt. It wasn't always this way. Back at Oklahoma, Bonitto had been a rising star, lightning fast, unpredictable, a nightmare for quarterbacks. But when draft day came, something went wrong. He slid further than expected. Cameras showed other players hugging families and crying tears of joy. Bonitto's smile was smaller, quieter, because deep down he knew the NFL didn't believe in him the way he believed in himself. And when he finally got his shot with Denver, it didn't go the way the fairy tale promised. His rookie season was a blur of missed tackles, blown coverages, and quiet sidelines. He'd stand next to coaches on game day, helmet on, waiting for a chance that barely came. Every week he told himself, next time. Every week, that chance slipped away. The Denver media didn't hold back either. Headlines called him a rotational risk. Fans on social media said things like, "Cut him already. Another Elway-era mistake. Just trade him for picks." It was brutal, but it was fuel, because Nik Bonitto wasn't built to quit. He was built to evolve. During the offseason, while most players took vacations or downtime, Bonitto disappeared. No interviews, no posts, no offseason parties. Just pure, obsessive work. In the weight room, on the practice turf, at dawn, when the facility was still locked, he'd wait outside for staff to let him in. Teammates would later say they'd never seen anything like it. "He was possessed," said one veteran linebacker. Like he had a personal vendetta with every rep, and maybe he did. Bonitto wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing silence. The kind of silence that comes when there's nothing left to prove. He started studying pass rushers. Not just their moves, but their rhythm, their tempo. Von Miller, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons. He'd freeze film, rewind, play again. Every flick of a wrist, every shift of balance. He studied it all. But when he hit the field again, he didn't copy anyone. He built his own language, his own rhythm. And then came week 4, 2024. The Broncos were down, the defense tired, the crowd restless. The opposing quarterback was picking them apart, drive after drive. Denver needed a spark, something, anything. And then, on a 3rd and long, Bonitto lined up on the edge. He glanced at the left tackle, saw the smallest twitch of weight on his toes, a tell. That's all he needed. Snap. Explosion. Bonitto blew past the blocker like he wasn't even there. One step, two, twist, and boom. The quarterback never saw it coming. The sack hit like thunder. The crowd erupted. The defense came alive. That single play changed everything. The next drive? Another sack. The drive after that? A forced fumble. By the end of the game, Denver had won. And the quiet, forgotten rookie had become the name on every commentator's lips. Nik Bonitto, one analyst said, voice rising. Just put the entire AFC on notice. From that point forward, something shifted. The coaches started calling his name first in drills. The media started asking questions. Fans started buying his jersey. But more than anything, Bonitto himself changed. He stopped flinching, stopped apologizing for being underestimated, stopped waiting for validation. He wasn't the backup anymore. He wasn't the question mark. He was the answered. As the season rolled on, Bonitto became a force of nature. His speed off the edge was unmatched. His instincts, razor sharp. The same doubters who once said he couldn't hang in the NFL were now calling him a defensive cornerstone. By midseason, he led the team in sacks, quarterback pressures, and forced fumbles. But if you asked him about it, he'd shrug. Still got work to do, he'd say, because to Bonitto, stats were just surface-level noise. What mattered was the story behind them. The grind, the loneliness, the nights when he almost gave up but didn't. One reporter asked him late in the season how he managed to turn it all around. Bonitto just smiled and said, "Everybody talks about overnight success. They just forget how long the night is." That line went viral, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. Behind every breakout, there's a shadow. Behind every cheer, there's a silence that once hurt. And for Nik Bonitto, that silence had finally become his greatest weapon. As Denver's defense climbed the rankings and his name started popping up on highlight reels and talk shows, people began to wonder, how far can this kid go? Little did they know, that question would be answered soon, because what came next wasn't just a rise, it was a revolution. The quiet underdog who once practiced alone under flickering lights was about to become one of the most expensive and respected defensive players in Denver history. But that's chapter 2, when the fire he built finally burned its way to the top of the NFL, because for now, all anyone could say was this: Nik Bonitto wasn't just backed, he had arrived. The morning the news broke, the Denver skyline gleamed with the kind of sunlight that feels like prophecy, sharp, golden, unstoppable. Phones buzzed across the NFL world, sports alerts flashed like alarms. And every major outlet carried the same headline in bold letters: Broncos sign Nik Bonitto to historic $100 million deal. It wasn't supposed to happen this fast. 2 years ago, Nik Bonitto was fighting for playing time, written off as a rotational edge rusher with potential that might never bloom. Now, he wasn't just part of the team. He was the team's heartbeat. The moment the news hit social media, the reaction was chaos. Fans erupted with pride, rivals raised eyebrows, and analysts stumbled over their words trying to explain how the once overlooked linebacker had become one of the highest-paid defenders in franchise history. But while the world buzzed, Nik Bonitto sat quietly at his locker, staring at the contract in front of him, signature already dry, hands still trembling. Not from nerves. From memory, he thought of the days when he had no guarantee, when he was fighting to earn a spot on the roster. The extra hours under flickering practice lights. The feeling of being invisible in a room full of stars. And now, the same people who doubted him were rewriting their opinions overnight. Yet, as always, Bonitto didn't celebrate loudly. When reporters crowded the locker room, thrusting microphones toward him, he didn't smile wide or make promises. He simply said, "Money doesn't change who I am. Work does." That quote hit harder than any sack, because if you've followed Nik Bonitto's journey, you know he never plays for applause. He plays for silence. The silence after a quarterback hits the turf. The silence after the crowd gasps. The silence of proving people wrong without saying a word. The turning point. Leadership through grit. After signing, Bonitto didn't slow down. He doubled up. The next training camp, he was the first in and the last out. Younger players began following his routine like a blueprint. Denver's locker room started to change. What used to be a team known for inconsistency began finding rhythm. And that rhythm started with number 42. During one intense August scrimmage, rookie edge rusher Drew Sanders missed an assignment that led to a blown play. He slammed his helmet down, frustrated. Bonitto jogged over, not to yell, but to teach. He showed Sanders the technique again, slow and patient, then said something that would later circulate across NFL films. "Every mistake is just a rep in disguise. Don't waste it." That's who Nik had become, not just a pass rusher, but a standard. Even head coach Sean Payton, a man known for his no-nonsense demeanor, praised him in a post-practice interview. Bonitto doesn't talk about culture. He builds it. And he did. Every game that season felt like a statement. Every sack was a punctuation mark. He wasn't just playing well, he was commanding the field. Quarterbacks began shifting protections to his side. Offensive coordinators started designing plays to avoid him. But no matter how much attention came his way, Bonitto never lost the calm that defined him. The same calm he'd had when everyone called him a mistake. The game that defined him Week 11, primetime. Broncos versus Chiefs. The stage was massive. The opponent, bigger. Patrick Mahomes, the golden boy, the unshakable magician of the AFC, had never been sacked by Bonitto before, until that night. Midway through the second quarter, Mahomes dropped back, scanning left, pump faking to his tight end. That was the split second Bonitto needed. He shot through a double team like lightning splitting a storm, wrapped his arms around Mahomes, and dragged him down with a force that silenced Arrowhead. The sound was deafening, not from the crowd, but from the absence of it. You could hear the pads, the breath, the exhale, and then came the roar. Bonitto stood over Mahomes for a second, not in arrogance, but in arrival. Cameras flashed. Commentators shouted. And somewhere in the press box, a scout scribbled something on his notepad that summed it up perfectly. He's no longer underrated. He's undeniable. By the end of that game, Bonitto had racked up 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and a reputation that could no longer be ignored. The next morning, ESPN called it the night the league finally met Nik Bonitto. The redemption beyond money for Bonitto. The $100 million deal wasn't validation, it was responsibility. He saw it not as a finish line, but a mirror, the reflection of every ounce of work, pain, and persistence that had brought him there. In an interview with NFL Network after the deal, he said something that instantly went viral. Everybody loves the story when you make it. Nobody watches the chapters where you almost don't. It wasn't a line crafted for social media. It was real, because Bonitto's story wasn't written in easy wins. It was built through failure, through nights where his only audience was the echo of his own footsteps leaving the facility long after dark. He had once been the player nobody noticed. Now, he was the one every young linebacker studied, the one fans pointed to and said, "That's how you do it." Teammates began calling him the architect, because while others played the game, he built the foundation, the climax, the speech that defined the locker room. It was the final week of the regular season. Denver had clinched a playoff berth for the first time in years. The locker room was buzzing, cameras ready, champagne bottles waiting. But before the celebration began, Bonitto stood up. That he didn't shout. He didn't give a speech rehearsed for the cameras. He just looked around the room and said, "They called us done before we started. Every snap, every hit, every yard, we earned it. Nobody gave us this. So remember that every time you put on this jersey, you're wearing proof that hard work doesn't ask for permission." The room went silent, the kind of silence that carries weight. Then, one by one, players started pounding their chests, shouting his name. Nik Bonitto had become what every team needs, not just a leader, but a symbol, legacy in motion. When you watch Bonitto play now, you don't just see technique, you see purpose. Every snap is a reminder that greatness doesn't arrive overnight. It crawls, bleeds, and rebuilds itself until it earns the right to stand tall. And as the camera pans across him before each snap, eyes calm, stance low, wind brushing across his visor, you realize something. This isn't the story of a contract or a comeback. It's the story of a man who was buried under doubt and decided to grow roots instead of breaking. Nik Bonitto didn't just earn $100 million. He earned silence. The kind that follows when your critics run out of words, because they tried to bury him, but they forgot one thing: that he wasn't dirt, that he was the seed.